My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that, of course, the land we are gathered in is located in Treaty 1 territory. That's the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Innuit, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. Delighted to see so many people here tonight, both here and online. We're here, of course, gathered to celebrate the Winnipeg launch of Jesusland, stories from the upside-down world of Christian pop culture by Joelle Kidd. You can applaud that raucously. It's a truly fabulous book, so I won't take up too much of your time with housekeeping notes, but I did want to begin by thanking ECW Press for being so great to work with, for publishing this book, and for making this evening a possibility. We're also delighted to have Andrew Unger on board to host a conversation this evening. I will just interject for one moment. If you have just arrived and are looking for a chair, there are still some located over there, and there is an aisle in the middle, so you can find your way to a seat more easily that way. We'll hear from our author in just a moment, but before I introduce our participants, just a few words about format. There'll be a reading up here, and then that'll be followed by a conversation to my left. Following that, there'll be an opportunity for questions from you, so please do allow those to percolate throughout the evening. Once it comes time for the Q&A, I'll approach you with this microphone in what is hopefully a non-threatening manner. Not because we don't trust you to project, but just because that ensures that everyone watching at home can hear your question as well. And I'll be back at the end to review signing procedure. Jesusland has already become not only a best-selling book here at the store, but also a staff favorite. Its 9 incisive essays explore evangelical culture and media, orbiting around her experience at a school here in Winnipeg. It's insightful, personal, funny, and exceedingly well-written. Our host for the evening, Andrew Unger, is the author of the satirical news website, The Unger Review, formerly The Daily Bonnet. Since 2016, Andrew has written more than 3,000 satirical articles, many of which are included in the collection The Best of the Bonnet. Andrew's novel, Once Removed, won the Best First Book Award at the 2021 Manitoba Book Awards. And when we were thinking of a host for this event, we wanted to ensure that we had someone in the driver's seat capable of the thoughtful insight and humor that's embodied in Joelle's work. And luckily, Andrew accepted our invitation. So we're so pleased to have him here this evening. Our guest of, oh, yes, applauding. Our featured guest, Joelle Kidd, is a writer, award-winning journalist, and editor living in Toronto. Her short fiction and essays have appeared in outlets including The Walrus, LitHub, Catapult, Prism International, Prairie Fire, and This Magazine. Joelle holds an MFA from the University of Guelph's creative writing program. Jesusland is her first book, and what an incredible start for a writing career. Please give her an enormously warm welcome.
Thank you, that was so kind. Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of thank yous actually before I read, because it's really exciting to be at McNally Robinson, which was like my bookstore as a kid. I used to climb that little round staircase and go stare at all the Anne of Green Gables dolls, and it was like the highlight of my week. And so it's really special to be reading my first book here. So thank you to McNally. This has been a great process working with them. Thanks to my publisher, ECW, as mentioned. They are awesome. Please check out their books. They publish great work, often about pop culture. Recommend the Pop Classic series. And thank you all for coming. I'm excited to see so many family members and friends from Winnipeg, and it's really fun to be back here. So yeah, I wanted to read a bit from the second chapter of my book. It's called Boys Bible, Girls Bible, subtitled Gender, Purity, Culture, and the New Look for Teen Bible Publishing. And I think we'll talk more about like the research process of writing this book, but I think this is one of the more fun chapters for me to look back on, because there was such a gap in what I remembered versus what I saw when I returned to what I'm going to read about, which is teen magazines for Christian girls. So yeah, I will read a little bit, and then we're going to have a chat and answer your questions. In focus groups, online polling, and one-on-one discussion, Transit Books has found that the #1 reason teens don't read the Bible is that it is too big and freaky looking, says the publishing copy. This fashion magazine format for the New Testament is the perfect solution to that problem. Revolve is the new look for teen Bible publishing. I don't remember thinking the Bible was freaky looking when I was a teen, but I do remember Revolve. First published in 2003, this Bible zine sandwiched an accessible translation of the Bible's New Testament between soft, glossy covers, printed with the bright pink, blue, and orange hues of the early 2000s. On the cover were 3 laughing girls, their faces partially obscured by fashion mag-style headlines. Are you dating a godly guy? And other quizzes. Beauty secrets you've never heard before. How to get along with your mom, and other relationship notes. I remember being 12 or 13, lying on my friend's bed, deep in a fit of giggles, paging through this Bible's glossy magazine stock pages to find quizzes that would tell us whether our non-existent boyfriends were godly, whether we were introverted or extroverted, and a million other small quirks of personality. We flipped through to find every Guys Speak Out feature, which were sidebars scattered throughout the scripture text that featured Q&As with unnamed guys. These guys were represented by stock photos of men dunking basketballs and leaning against trees. We'd compete to find our favorite guy, arguing over which one of them were cute. Our enjoyment was half ironic, half sincere. We weren't technically spending our Saturday night sleepover reading the Bible, evidently the way the publisher intended, the way we would read a real teen magazine. There just happened to be a bunch of ancient religious text in there that we were flipping past, too. 20 years after it was published, I flipped through again, this time without the tactile sensation of the magazine pages. After frustrated attempts to buy a used copy from someone in the southern US, I have to settle for scrolling digitally through this relic of my preteen years. The Y2K era fonts and illustrations and the cheesy photos of laughing teens light up some nostalgic center in my brain. In a beauty tip sidebar, this Bible suggests that I pray every time I apply my sunscreen so as to condition myself to pray more. The biggest problem with this is I'm very bad at remembering to apply my sunscreen. Another sidebar gives me quite ultimately sound advice about what to do in the aftermath of a sexual assault, though this is accompanied by a terrifying stock image of a crying girl with thick lines of mascara running down her face. A calendar page for January 2003 suggests that on January 3rd, I should, quote, pray for a person of influence. Today is Mel Gibson's birthday. A cutesy-looking Q&A section entitled Blab offers this exchange. Q. The Bible says I'm supposed to be loving my enemies. Does this mean I'm supposed to love Satan? A. The answer is no. We are not to love Satan. Satan is the enemy of God. He is more than a foe to us. He is evil itself, and as children of light, we cannot love darkness or any part in it. So no, there's no way you could confuse us for a regular teen magazine. But in many ways, it offered the same thrills, something to giggle about with your friends, and the possibility lurking that you might read some advice, some tip that would change your life, transform you from an awkward teen girl to a stylishly confident and competent adult. Revolve was far from the first evangelical product to adopt the form of popular media as housing for its religious messaging. For me and my friends, it was just one of the many that surrounded us. There were Christian girl groups and boy bands, a Christian girls magazine, Brio, and apparel, graphic tees, jewelry, scarves, and more printed with Christian messages. Revolve's publisher, Thomas Nelson, had identified teens' issues with the Bible not as substantive or ideological, but as a problem of form, too big and freaky looking, and decided to simply repackage religion for a new generation using one of the more popular media of the time, teen magazines. Other than the fact that Revolve and its ilk were available at the Christian bookstore instead of the mall, and our mothers and grandmothers seemed just more eager to buy them for us, these products seemed like just another drop in the sea of pink glitter being constantly marketed to us at the turn of the millennium. But these Christian versions of teen media tended to carry another layer of presumed meaning, representing not only another option, but an alternative. As researcher Sarah Moslin, her PhD, puts it, evangelical pop culture, quote, simultaneously valorizes and critiques popular media, asking its audience to reject the meaning of popular culture without rejecting the meaning-making devices that form that culture in the first place. They both displaced and depended on those other products. Secular teen magazines like 17 and J14 were meant to be unholy, immoral in a myriad of ways. But stick the Bible in there and make some of the beauty tips reference Jesus, and it becomes a good thing. I wasn't supposed to reject teen magazines outright. I was supposed to only buy Christian teen magazines. The culture we consumed was cobbled together from the evangelical produced and the fringes of acceptable non-Christian media, never wholly Jesus and never really wholly secular either. It makes sense that evangelical publishers would want to capitalize on this market. If you are like me, old enough to remember the era before the internet dominated all of our lives, you probably recall how big a thing magazines were to teenagers. For teen girls in particular, magazines were an authoritative resource to help those feeling adrift in the anxious, hormone-soaked years of being a teenager. Their pages spoke with the confident voice of grown-up women writers and editors who had made it through to the other side, become adults, and were now kindly reaching back to offer help to those still struggling through. Much of the format for teen magazines took on this advisory tone. There were endless tips, advice columns, quizzes, and guides, the kinds of writing that suggest the reader's in search of answers. While secular teens turned to sassy 17 and Teen Vogue, Christian readers had the aforementioned Brio and Revolve Bible. For the publishers behind them, they were the perfect proven medium to deliver Christian instruction to teen girls. As I scrolled in a nostalgic rush through the Guys Speak Out features, the colorful calendars, the question I now wanted to ask was, how innocent was this instruction? Evangelical media for girls was meant to reinforce the message of Christianity, of course, but it's hard to ignore the other messages they carried, messages spelled out in iridescent glitter. This is what girlhood means. What else would I think when even the scriptures were filled with beauty tips? When Brio promoted books like Secret Keeper, The Delicate Power of Modesty, or asked in an article about building good habits if your habits would one day make you a blushing bride or a Miss Piggy. Ideas about gender were being marketed alongside and becoming entangled with religion. Every pink Bible and God's Precious Daughter t-shirt was also selling a script, and every glossy issue dropped in a millennial teen's mailbox had lots to say about purity, modesty, and gender compliancy. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot for this book. I love this book. It was fantastic. And I must say, even though the book deals with a lot of like very, serious issues and the serious implications of this Christian pop culture, it still is a book about pop culture. And so I actually found it a lot of fun to read. And I don't know, like some of it gets, pretty dark, but I was, this is such a fun book. Did you have fun writing it? Or, yeah.
Yeah, I did. I think some chapters more than others, but I had a lot of fun in the research process because I have such a nostalgic attachment to a lot of the stuff. And so, yeah, going back and looking at things and, trying to recapture how I felt at the time was a really interesting process. I keep saying that there's like a heavy chapter about purity culture and some like darker chapters, but I keep saying that actually the comedy chapter was like the worst for me to write because I just hated watching all these Christian comedy specials. Like I really didn't like them. They weren't funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask what was the most challenging chapter to write. So that was the comedy. Ironically, the comedy chapter was the most difficult.
Yeah, weirdly. I mean, I think, there's a chapter where I solicited like interviews from friends and people I know and other people who grew up like Christian about their experiences with purity culture. And that was a difficult chapter to write just because reading through a lot of materials hard. It was very emotional. I was very emotional writing it, but the chapter came together really easily in the writing process. But yeah, that comedy chapter, I feel like it took a while for me to find a way into it, and just watching a lot of stuff that I really didn't enjoy. So yeah, that was probably the hardest one.
So you talked a little bit about came back to some of this material. So how much of the book was based on your memories of growing up at the time versus how much of it was pop culture that maybe you uncovered through research that you weren't even aware of at the time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it started out kind of led by my experience that I remembered. But I also had, I think, an experience that probably a lot of people have, where even when I really identified with evangelical Christianity, I didn't necessarily enjoy a lot of the pop culture. Like, I think most Christians kind of think Christian music is bad, or like most Christians kind of don't watch Christian movies. So I also was kind of trying to get like a broad like overview of, yeah, what exists or existed at the time in this space, and what does it say about like the world we were living in then and now. So yeah, it's probably a little more research-based than personal, but yeah, my personal recollections were usually sort of a way into.
Is there any of it? Is there any of it that you, music or movies or whatever, that you like now? Like, what's your favorite Christian rock band? Or
I think if you asked me this a few years ago, I'd be like, ew, I hate them. But then I kept re-listening for this book, and now I'm like a Reliant K fan again, and they're actually great. And I won't take any guff about Reliant K. So yeah, that's my favorite now.
All right, I'll have to. I've heard that name, and I don't think I've ever actually listened to it.
Come on.
Larry Norman was my. I mean, it's a little before my time, but one of the things that I thought about when I'm reading your book that I never had really thought about this pop culture before was that I just try to think of why was it that as a Christian teen myself, although this is in the 90s, a little before your era, but I remember thinking too that the Christian pop culture wasn't any good. The music wasn't as good, the movies weren't as good, and so on. And I was trying to figure out why was the quality lesser. And I never thought of this until I read your book, was that, so I'll just read my question here. You mentioned how this pop culture was often didactic, and that this can be tolerated or even expected in children's programming, like say VeggieTales. But in films and music that's geared towards older teens and adults, it feels out of place. And I never thought of that until reading your book, that maybe it was this didactic element, perhaps is the reason that this pop culture always felt second rate, despite in later years increased budgets and production values. In a sense, it remains childish. So I wonder if you have a thought about that.
Yeah, I kind of think it is because, yeah, one of the reasons I was so interested in the 2000s, other than being like growing up then, is I feel like that was sort of like when Christian culture crossed over into the mainstream, and also when all of these industries were sort of at their most profitable before the internet came along, and like publishing houses and record companies all sort of bottomed out a little bit. But just like secular versions of those companies, that was when Christian publishing, Christian music, and Christian movies were sort of at their, I mean, maybe we're coming back there, but they were at their sort of height. And so, yeah, all of a sudden, I don't think you could see visually the difference in quality as much between a Hollywood movie and a Christian movie, even ones that were made like for next to nothing with volunteers. But
and they would hire Kirk Cameron or Kevin Sorbo.
Exactly, and they've got a star in there. They're like competing on the same level. But then, yeah, I think there's something a little antithetical to like good art with these really didactic kinds of like segments of religion, or yeah, it doesn't even have to be like Christianity as a whole, but like this kind of Christianity that's trying to evangelize or to shore up its base. There's not a lot of room for nuance or anything but a very simple black and white story. And so I don't think people really connect with these things because, like, I don't know, I think most artists would say that that's sort of like the opposite of what you're trying to do when you're writing a script or a novel or music. You want to bring in that like depth and nuance. So yeah, I do think it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know, childish sounds a bit harsh, but I guess it kind of is.
Oh, sorry.
Like, I don't know, like, yeah, it does remind me of like VeggieTales, and it's like, I think VeggieTales is great, but that's because it was for 5-year-olds. So
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
So, well, okay, so beyond the sort of commercial motivation for some of these products, you mentioned like shoring up the base versus evangelizing, like winning new converts. Which of those two motivations do you think is the bigger drive there? Like, are you know, non-Christians watching these movies and reading these magazines? And
Yeah, I don't think so. I think very few. I think that another shift that I saw looking at like the 90s and 2000s was that I think things started to become more insular. Like, I think in the 70s and 80s, there wasn't as much Christian pop culture, but what was there to evangelize and to like win converts. But again, that profit motive, I think when these industries got bigger, it's not an easy sell, I don't think, or like the random viewer to watch a Christian movie, Passion of the Christ notwithstanding. And so I think a lot of it was about, trying to play to the, preach to the choir, and trying to like, I think maybe define the bounds of the type of Christianity that they were pushing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So do you think you could convince Kirk Cameron to star in a movie that features Jesusland?
Yeah, when I need to get adapted, and then we're gonna get Kirk Cameron.
Nice.
And he'll just read the title, and you'll be like, yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, you don't have to tell him anything about
Yeah.
it. Could be just like Fireproof, but you're hawking Jesus.
Yeah, that's right. I read this book.
Changed my life.
Changed my life.
Yeah, he doesn't have to know anything more about it.
Everyone should watch Fireproof if you haven't.
Yes.
It's my other favorite Christian media.
Okay, so you mentioned Passion of the Christ, so let's talk a little bit about that. I wanted to ask you, I'm going to read this because it's kind of a long question, hopefully not too long. I wanted to ask you about the parallels between the gruesome images of Passion of the Christ and the book that you mentioned in the later chapter, Jesus Freaks. In the 90s, when I was at this Christian school that I attended, we had this youth pastor come in and spend a whole hour describing in graphic detail the crucifixion. And the goal of that, I suppose, was to sort of suggest that we had no idea how much Christ really sacrificed for us, as if the meaning of his death was somehow enhanced by how gruesome it was. And I think that the Passion of the Christ had a similar sort of message. And then in 1999, the book Jesus Freaks came out, a kind of modern day Martyr's Mirror or Fox's Book of Martyrs, complete with graphic stories of Christian persecution. So I'm wondering if you see these as working in tandem, or if they're somehow contradictory. If we're told that the important thing about Christ's death is how gruesome and torturous it was, then don't the stories of Christian persecution and books like Jesus Freaks actually ironically diminish the uniqueness of Christ's crucifixion?
Ooh.
Sorry.
No, I like this thesis. I think they are kind of in the same, coming from the same like purpose. Like, it was really important for Mel Gibson and everyone making that film, it seems, to not only show crucifixion really unsparingly, but the actor who played Jesus like kept almost dying of various illnesses, and he had like a heart attack. He had to have open heart surgery afterward. Like, he was, on death's door, but he was willing to suffer it all because
these are true stories, or kind of.
This is what he says. I don't know how true, but I do think he had to have some kind of surgery afterward. And I think that's like part of it too. It's like, I'm really suffering for this message, but that doesn't validate the message. Like, you can't, and I think this is the problem with this idea of persecution that I talk about in the Jesus Freaks chapter, is they are mutually exclusive, actually. Like, the fact that you suffer doesn't make your suffering inherently meaningful or inherently right, you know what I mean? So Sometimes they line up and sometimes they don't. And I think like it's a little bit, again, I feel like they're all connected in this way. Like it's sort of like the prosperity gospel. It's like the idea that if something happens, God willed it to happen. Like there's this kind of thinking that's a little bit like backwards logic. Like whatever happens proves the meaning of what happened. And so I think that's like kind of where that fits in, because yeah, it's like this big graphic tale of suffering, but it really upset, for instance, the Jewish community, who rightly, I think, watched this movie and said this is extremely anti-Semitic, and there's no empathy towards the suffering that they have as people who are being insulted and denigrated by what he's putting out. So you kind of have to have this like dual thinking, double think, and then you also have to like win the suffering game. Like you have to suffer the most to, you know, so it's like a very complicated kind of proposition to me, to want to, yes, always be hurting the most and winning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about this, this sort of the way evangelicals have been primed, as you say, by pop culture, and not just pop culture, but pop culture in particular, to look for persecution even where it doesn't exist, such as the war on Christmas that you talked about. Can you talk a bit about how this has resulted in the current rise of right-wing authoritarian politics?
Yeah, I mean, I do think they're connected. Like, again, it's that double standard and double think of like, I think how I put it in the book was like the urge to like rule the world, but also be persecuted by it. So like, yeah, you have to be always sort of under attack. And there's a researcher that I quote in the book who studies martyrdom stories. Shout out to my cousin Josh, who recommended this book to me. I don't know if you remember that. The Myth of Persecution. Okay, the real shout out is for Sarah. And yeah, as a researcher, she's been unable to prove all but I think 6 stories of martyrdom in the early church. And so she's kind of talking about why, if these aren't literally true, why is this such a pervasive, like, foundational myth of Christianity? And I think it does have to do with what she says, which is there's no negotiating with your persecutor. You can't come to an understanding. You can't like do anything reparative or restorative, and you can't find a middle ground. And so it's sort of like the flip side of being like on the offensive, is that if someone is persecuting you and they are like a heartless enemy, you don't have to come to any sort of agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that myth makes people look for it where it isn't, where it isn't there.
Yeah. And I think, I guess I kind of missed the other part of your question, but I think now, like, when you see like Donald Trump, rising to power in America, and the right, which has really sort of like gobbled up Christianity and made it essential to their politics, like they won, like Donald Trump is the president, but you would never be able to tell from the way that they speak, because it's always that they're under attack still, and that there's some kind of shady cabal that is apparently running the show, even though they're not in power.
Everything's an attack.
Yeah.
Comedy even.
Yeah.
Can I mention Slavoj Žižek?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Please.
That's always how good way to start a question. Okay. Okay. So Slavoj
What would you
Žižek.
do if I had said no? If I had said no, what would
I don't know. I would have just skipped the preamble. I would have just gone straight to the question. So Žižek talks about how in modern day capitalism, we purchase not just a product, but simultaneously our redemption from being only a consumer. Like, we are buying a messaging or the feeling of good by being green, for example. We're buying that feeling as much as we're buying a product. And this seems even more overt in Christian pop culture. Like, it's being sold, explicitly being sold this way and marketed this way as not just an entertainment, but as if you're doing something righteous by consuming it. Can you talk a bit about the connection between consumerism and this built-in sense of holiness or righteousness or self-righteousness or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, oh, that's such a good connection. Yeah, I think it is like when we're talking about playing to the bass or like preaching to the choir, like it is sort of, and I remember this feeling from when I was younger. You sort of feel obligated as a Christian to listen to the Christian music or buy the book or whatever, like to be a good Christian and to, you're all in the same boat, you gotta support, like, I think I mentioned in the book, like my youth group where we all like, everybody in the van, we gotta go see Nativity Story the day it comes out to boost the box office numbers. And yeah, so you're kind of like held hostage a little bit by your belief. And I think there's also a resistance to like criticism from inside the religion itself. But yeah, I do think it is a little bit of a parallel too with like things like greenwashing, where yeah, it's supposed to kind of absolve you and sort of like making a healthier choice on a menu, like, oh, I'll buy the Christian thing because it'll be wholesome and it'll be good.
Do you remember, I don't know if this was, in your era or not, but in the 90s, you go to the Christian bookstore and they have the CDs or whatever, and they always try to give you like, they try to give you a Christian alternative to the secular album. If you like Radiohead, you'll love Stephen Curtis Chapman. And the recommendations were always like way off or whatever. But do you remember, did they have that when you were at the, was that still
I heard about this from so many
Yeah.
people. I don't remember it. From the halls.
Yeah.
But I have heard that from a lot of people.
So by the time you were listening to this music or the movies or whatever, had the quality improved enough that at least when you were young, you didn't notice that it wasn't Radiohead or whatever?
I think the quality was a lot better, but I never really connected with a lot of Christian pop culture, which I think was weirdly part of why I was interested in the subject matter, because I think as a kid, I mean, I had flashes, I had moments where I was like, yeah, I get this, I'm on board, but a lot of times I felt like really fish out of water when people around me were enjoying something because I didn't connect with it. So yeah, part of this was a bit of a question, like, how do I figure out like what the draw is here? But I think there's certainly things that people genuinely enjoy, and I don't know, it's hard to say because I was not alive in like the 80s and I was really young in the 90s. So when I watch that stuff, it seems so dated to me that I can't probably feel how cool it might have been. But yeah, I do feel like the quality improved by the 2000s.
I remember feeling this, I don't know if you felt this either. Did you wonder ever whether, like, because I sort of felt maybe the same way you did, that, oh, this isn't as good.
Mm-hmm.
Did you wonder whether everyone else was seeing the same thing you are and they were just pretending to like it?
Yeah, I think that was part of my confusion. Like, does everyone feel this way? Is it just me? Am I out of it? Like, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I also felt like, I guess there's also, this goes back to the idea of persecution a little bit, but I think there's also a sense of like, because you are setting yourself apart from regular culture. So I remember watching The Simpsons and feeling a little attacked.
Yeah.
You know, like there's representations of Christianity outside your faith. Yeah, right. And you think like, that's not what it's like at all. And so, yeah, there's probably some kinds of community that you get from just sticking within your bubble.
I remember the moment when the two Flanders boys in The Simpsons started singing, I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. And that was, I felt seen. I was like, that was, who wrote this? Because that was like a church song from back in the day or whatever. But you lived for 3 years in Slovakia. Do you think being removed from a culture, in this case, North American evangelical helps a person to see its flaws and quirks? Do you think that at all contributed to you feeling disconnected from it in some way?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I was pretty young at the time, but I do think like, well, that was sort of the like little kernel, that feeling I think was like the thing I first started writing about, like the very first stuff I wrote that turned into this book. Because I think when I moved back here and started going to Christian school, it was kind of like double culture shock. It was like back in Canada in a different culture, and then in this subculture that I really didn't know anything about because like my family wasn't like engaging with any of that. And so, yeah, like some of the little things that I like wrote about in the book, like having like peers at school constantly asking if famous people were Christian or not, or like things like that. Like it just felt like a different world, and like trying to think about that disconnected feeling like kind of was where I came at this book. But yeah, in general, I think like it of course helps to like step outside your context and see things more broadly. But I also think lots of people travel or have a wide range of experience or whatever, and don't necessarily step back.
Sure.
Also, I think evangelicals are very good at looking at their own quirks. I think it's like kind of like the bad Christian music jokes or whatever.
Right,
like
the
people who are Christian tell those jokes. Like I remember like little Tumblr blogs about like goofy Christian things, and I think you just needed a bit of an outlet to like bond over those things. But people aren't blind. They know that the movie they're watching is bad. Like
I remember always, is such and such a celebrity a Christian? That was like a big, oh wow, that person's a Christian, or a Canadian.
Yes, it's very similar.
I know that person's a Canadian or whatever, or whatever, and that was always the exciting.
Another demographic that likes to be an underdog.
Some parallels there, Okay, I'm scrolling down my list and see what I haven't asked yet. Is there anything, did I ask this? Is there anything you like or miss about growing up evangelical?
I don't know. I think there are things to like and to miss, but personally, I don't really.
Besides Reliant K.
But I can listen to them anytime, so it's fine. No, not really, because I think like, I don't know, I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I feel like a lot of the things that I was sort of taught that I would get from church or from like evangelical Christian spaces, I feel like I've found those in my life. I have like a really strong sense of community and like people around me and a sense of purpose and all this stuff. When I think back on being immersed in that evangelical culture, I think about how I felt like a lot of shame and really bad about myself and really confused and conflicted about my own opinions and thoughts. And so I wouldn't say I really miss it.
You don't need to. You talk at one point in the book, you talk about Christian pop culture of the 2000s as creating a potential for a hermetically sealed Christian life for every aspect of a person's life. Even all forms of entertainment are contained within that worldview. It's possible then to completely avoid the outside world until adulthood, maybe far into that. So do you think this stems from a fear, or where does that desire to shut yourself off, in a sense, not shut yourself off, because like you say, you've got the teen magazines that's like now like a Bible or whatever, but
I think it's that dual thing again, where you can really encase yourself in a bubble, but at the same time, evangelical right-wing Christians are not like the Amish. Like they actually don't want to be siloed away. They saying they loosely, but like there are huge movements that want to affect politics and society at large and restructure how our society functions and is governed. And so I really don't think you can have it both ways. Like, you can't seal yourself off and try to control how everyone else is living. But I do think it kind of maybe it does come from a fear. I mean, when I think about those anxious feelings of unbelonging and stuff and shame, yeah, I think there was a lot of fear that I sensed around me. Like, there's a chapter about creationism in the book, and I think, like, to me, that was really felt like very like fear just thick in the air, like this has to be true. And if it's not, my entire world will crumble. And so, yeah, I think there is that sort of like tenuousness to some forms of Christianity that I think is a little bit, yeah, it's a little hard to reconcile, because, you know, if you're going to base your entire life on something, it has to be not fragile enough to fall apart under scrutiny and your own like self-critical thought. So, so that might be where some of that impulse comes in, to kind of like shelter yourself and not interact with difficult, I don't know, ideas or subjects or something.
Yeah, in that chapter, I think you mentioned that they even, some of the, I don't know if it was Kent Hovind or who it was, actually literally said, this is the entire, without a literal reading of Genesis, the whole thing falls apart, you know? And so, well, you're really, you know, positioning things quite, you know.
Yeah, that's it, you're kind of in a corner there, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, yeah. Well, in terms of, you know, not thinking deep thoughts, this book definitely did have me thinking a lot of deep thoughts and a lot of things that I never really thought about before about the sort of culture that I grew up in. So I really appreciate that. And this is such a great book. I think we'll open it up now to questions from the audience. And I will say, given the, or do you have some warnings? I was going to say, please no sermons, only questions.
But if you want to tell me the best Christian band, I will listen to that too. I'm open to other recommendations. It doesn't have to just be like, hey, yeah.
And are there any questions or recommendations? What's the recommendations?
I'll just recommend classic audio A. You just want like.
Oh, okay.
Underdog lives.
I didn't really listen to them, and my memory of audio journaling is the gym teacher put it on when we were running laps. That's my association.
I also remember that. I was wondering, okay, I had a lot of, I really enjoyed, I am still enjoying reading your book. So you talk about a couple authors that struck you as progressive and interesting and back in your youth. I'm thinking Shane Claiborne and Donald Miller in particular. And then now you go back to them and they are not so progressive and whatever, right? But I wonder what, yeah, do you feel like their writing, regardless of where they've ended up nowadays, that broke my heart a little bit to read about Donald Miller, but their writing from back then, do you think it still has a place for kids that are in the situation that you and I were in 20 years ago? Like, yeah, it's maybe not super meaningful to you anymore, but does it still have a place? And if not, are there other artists that might have taken that place too?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it could still have a place. Like, I mean, of course, this doesn't only apply to like religious works of art. And when you look back on things you loved as a kid, sometimes they do not hold up, and that's fair. Yeah, I think there could still be it's a way in, right? Or it's a way out, maybe sometimes, like, and if that's like what connects with you, I think that's totally valid. I wouldn't like not give my hypothetical non-existent child like the irresistible revolution or something, but yeah, but I did find it interesting too, because I was in such a different context the first time I read it, to return to it and think like, wow, this is really different. I also think there must be a lot, I wish it was a little more tapped in, but I think there are probably a lot of works like that right now. And I think for all the negative things it's brought in to our society, the internet also does offer a lot of possibilities in that regard, where I think there are a lot of like people putting themselves out there online, making YouTube channels and blogs and whatever, who are able to get less mainstream takes, to a greater audience. And sometimes that has some negative connotations. Sometimes it's also like, I think would be really helpful for, like when I mentioned like jokey Tumblrs about goofy Christian stuff, like that was a bit of an outlet to me as a teen to be like, okay, I'm not crazy. Some of this stuff is weird. And so, yeah, I think like I wish I like had specific recommendations, which I don't, but I do think there are like a lot of creators like traditional media and more new media that are like filling that space now. The new generation of Donald Millers.
Hi, I would suggest perhaps the Newsboys.
Oh.
Okay.
Heard of them?
Okay, I had a real big Newsboys phase.
Okay.
I think I'm making this decree. I think we only listen to the old Newsboys.
Yes,
Do not Google the current lead singer of the Newsboys.
my favorite
Sorry.
is, I forget what it's called, the album with that weird spaceship on it.
Ooh.
Yes,
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 okay.
right?
That was good.
That's about the best one there is. Okay. Anyway, so having said that, as someone who deeply loved reading her Brio as a 13-year-old, and is now a pastor and wants to do much better for the youth and the generations coming behind us. Do you have any thoughts, maybe you get into this in your book, thoughts for parents and adults and spiritual caregivers in how we can do better in leading and caring for and giving spiritual formation for the younger ones following behind us?
Ooh, yeah. I don't think I'd like get into it too much in the book, especially because I'm not a parent, but I feel like, I guess one of the main things that I hope that readers who like are Christian or have some kind of like connection to Christianity currently, I guess I kind of hope that one of the things that people take away or think about from the book is this like need to be a very close and thoughtful reader of this kind of pop culture, because yeah, I do think that it's like we were talking about non-denominational churches and schools where it's like, oh, it's Christian, just Christian, but how many millions of versions of Christianity are there? And so I think like a lot of the media that I took in as a kid, it was often it was just sort of given to me without any vetting from any adults, and it was assumed to be positive and wholesome and whatever because it was Christian media. And then like thinking about all the kind of harmful messages it carries when I look back on it, I think, yeah, I wish there was a bit more of a close, careful attention towards what's actually being said in these things. So yeah, I don't know, and also I just think like the more open and communicative people are with young people, and the more we actually listen to how they're feeling and what they have to say about what they consume, the better.
I remember growing up in the church, they always told us about discernment, but that only meant from the secular pop culture, but it never was applied to the Christian pop culture.
Yeah.
They're just.
That's such a good point too, because yeah, like I remember Brio, there's actually a great scan of a Brio page online if you look it up, where they're reviewing Twilight, and highly recommend. But yeah, it's like I remember those, and like Plugged In was focused on the Family's Review site. So yeah, any secular movie you wanted to watch, you could type it into Plugged In, and it would tell you if it was good or not, or bad, because like based on how Christian is it. But there was no like similar critical thought about Christian pop culture. It was just, it's Christian, so it's good. So yeah, I think that the capacity was already there, but it wasn't being applied to, yeah, Christian media.
This has been great. I'm looking forward to reading the book. I haven't seen it at all yet, so thank you for this. I'm curious, and you folks, I think, both mentioned Fireproof. For current pop culture and the sort of the Christian presence in it, with things like Fireproof, with Angel Studios, and some of the more current media, particularly films, that have gotten better, better effects, better scripts, better actors. The quality is better. Do you think the acceptance of them in current society, like this year, is because they have gotten better in quality, or better in quality, less didactic, or is a larger group of society able more, how do I say this, more wanting a didactic presence? You know, is there just a larger group of evangelical Christians saying, we're good with this didactic presentation of an idea, and the quality's pretty good too?
Yeah, that might be true as well. I do think there's like the flip side to that, like feeling of fear I mentioned earlier, where I think there's some extent where it feels comfortable to, like, black and white didactic stuff is, if you agree with it, it can be comforting, I guess, like, to see what you think played out there. And I don't know, personally, I think that's a little bit of a danger too, because these are fictional movies. Like, that's what I can get over watching some of the movies. Like, they're inspirational stories, but they didn't happen, like they're fictional. So it's kind of like, yeah, I guess it's a little bit of like comfort reading or comfort watching, I would think. But yeah, because I haven't like super kept up on current Christian pop culture, but from what I've seen and read, I don't think it's become less didactic. Yeah.
Hi, sorry, I gotta read off here, otherwise I will absolutely ramble. Was there a temptation to look more into, like you're saying, kind of these modern evolutions of these elements of pop culture, or was the intention to kind of keep it a little sparkly, bubbly, Y2K, snapshot mirror or something?
Yeah,
sorry, and recommendations.
Oh, yes.
11D7.
Okay, I don't know this.
Yeah, and House of Heroes.
House of Heroes. Okay,
House of Heroes.
I've got stuff to
Pretty
look at.
underground.
You should build a playlist. Yeah, I guess I was trying to keep it to the 2000s, especially because I think it's like really interesting to go back when it's not that fresh and like dig in and see what was going on. And to me, I think I found a lot of threads that connect to today. And so that was a really interesting process for me. And it really kind of, I mean, sometimes kind of shocking, and just like to see, yeah, history playing out, like, sort of side tangent, just like, and one example of it was like, Roy Moore, who like ran for, his run for office was derailed by the revelation that he had a relationship with an underage girl. And when I was doing research for this book, like I didn't know about, he was involved in this big kerfuffle about getting the 10 Commandments put outside his courthouse in the early 2000s. And James Dobson was down there giving speeches and comparing him to Rosa Parks. And I was like, wow, that's just like, you kind of forget in the speed of the news cycle that like these politicians and these Christian leaders and whoever have been around for 20, 40 years. So yeah, it's a really interesting process that way. I guess I was a little tempted to bring in more modern valences of it as I wrote, because like, to be honest, yeah, I pitched this book in like 2023 and I was writing a book proposal and I was like, is this even gonna be relevant? And then it like got more relevant every like round of copy editing. I was like inserting more examples about, you know, like I remember Trump announcing he was selling a Bible and I was like, okay, I gotta put that in the book. Like, yeah, so it continues to feel relevant to me, but I think, yeah, I was interested in like, yeah, looking back and digging into that time.
We do have time for one more question.
Hi, so my question stems from, now I'm not as familiar with new Christian pop culture, I'm as new as you, so it's about that time as well. However, I'm curious what your thoughts are on so I recognize that Christian pop culture comes from a place of desire for representation and for media that aligns with our beliefs and represents us as a community. However, there is a significant lack of racial and socioeconomic diversity within that. And I'm wondering, again, I'm not as familiar with newer material, but what we grew up with was very white, very upper middle class. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on the harms and impact of that within that space.
Yeah, that's so true. I think, yeah, it's interesting. I was reading like, there's a book on Christian publishing I was reading called Evangelicals Incorporated. And I can't remember the exact stat, but yeah, it's true. Like Christianity, and even actually evangelical Christianity, because worldwide there's a lot of evangelical denominations, like it's an extremely racially diverse category. It's like there's, yeah, and especially in the States, like there's huge churches of Black Christians, and yet there's like no Black Christian media that's sort of like mainstream or like whatever, published by these big publishers, big companies, whatever. Yeah, and so yeah, it's definitely not representative of like the reality, and I kind of tend to think that's sort of a desire like to portray it in a way that is maybe actually not representative. Like, yeah, I think that, how do I put it? Like in that book, they were talking about publishing. It's like the publishing companies dictate the way that evangelicalism looks to a certain extent. Like if you're only publishing books by white authors, everyone thinks evangelicalism is only white people. So yeah, I don't know. I think yeah, I'm not up on the current pop culture as much either. I think there's got to be a little bit more diversity, but I also think that like when you talk about that wide umbrella of evangelical Christianity, that's also kind of splintering a bit today, because I think there's a lot of sort of like white nationalists, like very intentionally not diverse thought within some segments of right-wing Christianity. And so obviously like churches that have a lot of people of color don't necessarily align themselves with that. So yeah, it's sort of like that's more like in the States, like the groups that are have more political power right now too. So I think that also ties into it. It's like there's probably a lot on the grassroots level, again, like people posting stuff online and creating stuff for themselves, but I don't think you see it as much in like big structured top-down ways. I don't know, that was a rambling answer to this very interesting question.
Well, we have just reached 8 o'clock. Do you folks have any closing comments you might like to offer to wind us down before I go over signing procedure?
Do you have a closing benediction or? All I'll say is that it's a fantastic book, so you should definitely pick up a few copies. So.
I will just say, this is for this person, they don't serve breakfast in hell.
I don't know what that means.
Don't listen to the news voice.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Thank you both so very much. Thank you for ending with a classical reference. Please give them a welcome round of applause. We will be moving along to the signing portion of the evening, so in just a moment we will seat Joelle here behind this table. There will be a moment of chaos while we all attempt to get into a line that stretches down there. Please do feel free to come up and get a copy of the book signed before you pay for it. Just please do visit one of my colleagues before you hit the parking lot. We're so thankful to ECW Press once again for publishing this incredible book and for making this evening a possibility. To all of you for coming here, for your attention and for your questions. Thank you so very much. And now I'm going to ask you for 2 more rounds of applause. The first is for our host for this evening, Andrew Unger. And once again, Joelle Kidd. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Have a wonderful evening.